Thank you, everybody. Today we have Professor Ahmet Kuru. Ahmet Kuru is a professor of political science and the director of the Center for Islamic and Arabic Studies at San Diego State University. He is the author of Secularism and State Policies Toward Religion, the United States, France, and Turkey, published by the Cambridge University Press. The most recent book, Islam, Autoritarismo y su desenvolvimiento, ¿no? Una comparación global e histórica, fue publicada en portugués, ¿no? De la editora Dialéctica. En receipt Edwards, was included in the Times Literary Supplements books of the year. It has been translated into 15 languages, most recently in Portuguese. Professor, thank you very much for your presence here at USP.
Thank you, Professor Rafael Villa, for organizing this event and other academics and students for attending. My first time in Brazil, and this book tour is starting at Sao Paulo. I'm very happy to be in the prestigious University of Sao Paulo. And despite the strike and all the problems, it's great that you were able to organize. So I've been studying religion and politics for a long time. Today, we are going to focus on my new project on populism. Maybe we can just speak, right? But also, I want to emphasize my first project on secularism and the second one on Islam, authoritarianism, and underdevelopment, because the primary goal of my book tour here is to launch the Portuguese edition, as you also kindly referred to in the introduction, of my book, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a global and historical analysis or global and historical comparison. Since it was published in 2019 by Cambridge, 15 translations from Europe to Asia took place, and then finally the book reached to Latin America with the Portuguese edition. And next year we are going to launch the Spanish edition in Spain, but the translator is from Chile, a great journalist and intellectual. David Melendez is translating the book. Now, with this background, I want to emphasize that this is a very sensitive topic, religion and politics worldwide. The Islam book, for example, has been banned in Malaysia. The Malaysian Sharia Council, Islamic Council, say this book violates principles of Islam. Although I'm a Muslim, the book is very positive about Islam. They have a narrow understanding of Islam that they don't want an academic debate. So we now have a problem in Uzbekistan. The religious committee doesn't allow the book to be published. And we have had problems in Somalia. The translation was cancelled because of the worries and fear of the translators and publishers from the Islamists and also the ulama. So this sensitive topic has now, with the populism project, getting more risks for me, because the populism project, as you will see, I'll briefly mention too, include only Turkey as a Muslim majority country, but others like United States, France, Israel, India, and Russia are non-Muslim countries. but each has very deep controversy, right? In my country, United States, Trump came to power with polarization and controversy. France has been discussing Islam with the headscarf debate since early 2000 in a negative way. There is Islamophobia, anti-immigrant feelings, and also some real concerns about terrorism and violence. Then Israel obviously is a very contested issue. I don't know the Latin American case, but in the United States, the public opinion changing sharply from very strong pro-Israel position to turning into more negative tone now in American public, especially young generation from both left and right. I was in India a year ago, where there is a strong controversy, not only about Kashmir, but also about 200 million Muslim minority there, and what to do with the Modi government, populist, whether democracy can survive. And Russia, of course, triggering all sorts of debates, not only by attacking Ukraine, but also supporting many right-wing populist governments and parties in different parts of Europe. So now, what to do with religion and politics has been my main question for a long time, because in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, there was an extreme of secularization theory, which argued that religion is not important, eventually will be withered away. And from that extreme, especially in American academia, moved to another extreme after 9/11 terrorist attacks, as if religion is everything, especially for Muslims. Whatever Muslims do has to do something about religion. What I'm trying to do with my publications and teaching to show a middle ground between these two extremes, saying that yes, religion is important, but it's not everything. It's both a dependent variable and independent variable. Religion causes things like politics, economy, social change, but politics, economy, and society also form religion. So now, let me start with this specific discussion on populism, religion, and nationalism, which is the topic of today. Then go to broader issues, and after my brief presentation, I'll be happy to receive if there are questions. So, yes, thank you. When we look at the world today, we see the decline of democracy. And many analysts refer to the rise of populism as the independent variable or the cause of the decline of democracy globally, especially in the United States, which was seen as a leading democratic countries. The institutions are in a crisis. But in addition to taking populism as a reason for the decline or the crisis of liberal democracy, we should also treat as a social scientist populism and the rise of populism itself as an effect, as a dependent variable, and ask what is the cause, what is the independent variable of the rise of populism. That's what I'm trying to do in my new book project on populism and religion. So, my basic argument I have in the new project is that the three movements coalesce and establish a new alliance: populists, religious groups, and nationalists. Historically, from Europe to the Muslim world, there was a strong tension between religious forces and nationalists. But recently, things change, because historically, Catholicism and Islam emphasize an extraterritorial authority that we call Pope, Vatican, the Holy See in Catholicism. This is, as you know, well, this is the biggest Catholic majority country still, right? Brazil, despite the rise of Pentecostals and Protestants. And in Islam, the Caliph, Abbasi caliphs, then the Ottoman caliphs, not all societies recognize, but there was some supranational claim. Even today, Islamists imagine a caliphate, a unified Muslim ummah. So the ummah, but the nationalists bring national boundaries, national identity, national leadership. And against the ecclesia or ummah, they say nation should be the center of political imagination. And instead of Latin language for the Catholics and Arabic for the Muslims, the nationalists emphasized the vernacularization of language. Reformation, of course, was the culmination of efforts, maybe starting with Dante's Divine Comedy in Italian, early Renaissance. And in the Muslim world, nationalists who support Turkification, like Turkey's Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, Arab modernists, of course, they define Arabic, but they want to have a local interpretation, and all the nationalist motivations clashing with religion. But not anymore. Today, what we see in many countries, religious and nationalist forces coming together, especially under the leadership of populist leaders. That's why in this PowerPoint, I make a causal connection, how religious populists and nationalist groups coming together. And I pinpoint two factors. One is desecularization, because as I briefly mentioned, in 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, secularization was very strong theory of social science, but also many people believe in politics, in public life. Modern individuals don't need religion. But now, today, as a result of a process of maybe 40 years, which was pushed by the collapse of the Soviet Union and decline of socialism worldwide, then 9/11 triggered in a different ways. And in every country, from United States to Israel, from even Russia, which was the successor of atheistic Soviet Union, to Turkey, to India, there's a religious revival in the public life called desecularization. And this social phenomenon has been linked to economic phenomenon called neoliberalism, starting with Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, privatization, reduction of tax rates, and the public discourse of the importance of capitalism and the minimization of public sector, privatization, and other policies somehow linked to religion. In many countries, neoliberals and right-wing religious groups like each other, support each other, and they established the basis of what we see today, the rise of populism. So today I will briefly mention the 6 cases I am analyzing in my new book. And the reason why I choose these 6 cases is that they establish a comparative framework for a global analysis, because they show a huge variation in terms of religious minority, because United States is still Protestant majority, France even nominally, culturally Catholic majority, Turkey Muslim majority, Israel Jewish majority, Russia Orthodox majority, and India Hindu majority. And in addition to that, region-wide, North America, Western Europe, Middle East, subcontinent, and Eastern Europe. And in terms of regimes, United States and France, despite many problems, still categorized as liberal democracies by Freedom House. Israel is a democracy but not liberal. Turkey and India having problems, and Russia is authoritarian. So now let me briefly touch upon the 6 cases to show that despite their diversity, these cases show many similarities in terms of the discourse of the populist leaders, the way they bring together religion and nationalism, the way they follow an authoritarian playbook, and the way they were supported by desecularization and neoliberal policies. In the United States, for example, Donald Trump's MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, and when they say America, you are not part of it as Latin America. This is a specific notion of America, white America, United States America. That's why in the Super Bowl, the Spanish singer, when he emphasized America as all Americas, it was a challenge to the notion of making America great again. He reminds that America is a broader term, right? So Christian nationalism, bringing together religion and nationalism, has been an important part of MAGA, Make America Great Again movement of Donald Trump. And they basically challenge institutions, not only state institutions, but also established media, established universities. They try to punish Harvard, Columbia, and media institutions. Because when we look at the definition of populism, it's basically a discourse or a political strategy based on the elite people dichotomy. And the populist leader says, I am for the people, I represent the people, and I am against the elite because the elite is corrupt. This is having right-wing, left-wing versions. Bernie Sanders and now Mamdani, the New York mayor, are examples of left-wing populism. That's not what I analyze. I focus on right-wing populism because the left-wing have different policies, more egalitarian. Right-wing doesn't have even pretend to be egalitarian. And they have a clearly negative agenda against minorities, especially immigrants. So in this way, very different from left-wing version, the right-wing populism bring together the elite versus people dichotomy and certain policies against minorities, especially immigrants. And Trump supporters see certain American established elite somehow betraying the majority white people, bringing immigrants, making diversity celebrated. And ICE, therefore, the immigration officers now became the symbol of the policy they pursue to make America great again with minimized immigrants. France is an interesting case because there is no populist in charge. Macron, the president, is not a populist. He is a moderate, center-right liberal who pay attention to institutions. But it will not be surprising to see Marine Le Pen, the daughter of Jean-Marie Le Pen, the very right-wing populist leader, coming to power in the next elections. And then in my analysis, France is a test case because populists are not still there, because maybe religion is not that important in France, very secular country. And also an interesting case, among 5 men, we have 1 woman. Italy is another case as a female populist. And Marine Le Pen has been much more successful than his father. As you see in the presentation, his father, when he got 18% in 2002, it was a revolution in France. They say, how come these fascists get 18%? Of course, Marine Le Pen is more moderate than his father. He even kicked his father out of the party to show that she is more moderate, and she get higher percentage, 33 than 41%. But her standing against Muslim immigrants are not very matter, because she said that if she is elected, she will ban headscarf even on the street in France. And even Macron, in order to appeal the voters, tried to present himself tough against Islam. He gave a speech saying Islam is in crisis, which is direct contradiction with French laïcité. How come you, the president of a country, target a religion? Where is the religion-state separation, right? And when we talk about Islam, of course, Turkey is important, where Tayyip Erdogan has been ruling for a quarter of a century. His regime generally now called Islamist populism. And at the beginning, for the 10 years, his party pursued certain democratization reforms, making Turkey member of EU was the idea at the time. But from the beginning, Erdogan always present himself as the man of people against the elites. And he said there are white Turks, black Turks. He said, I'm black. The white Turks are the elite. And the Kurdish question, of course, complicates his policies. Sometimes he is tough against them because Turkish nationals are in his coalition. Sometimes, for various strategies, he gets an appeasement policy with Kurds. And Israel has, of course, a much more violent policy against the Arab minority. And in fact, it's not a minority, but there is a Arab citizen minority in Israel, and in addition to occupied territories, West Bank and Gaza. And Benjamin Netanyahu is now ruling the most right-wing coalition of Israel history. They try to have a judicial overhaul to make executive body much more powerful than judiciary. And Netanyahu has a corruption case, and with this quote-unquote reform, he also planned to get rid of the case against him. Then we move to Russia, which is a very interesting case because Putin himself was a KGB agent at the time. Officially, you were supposed to be atheist to be a KGB agent or Communist Party member. But now he has made Kirill the patriarch of Russian Orthodox Church, a pillar of the Russian government. And the invasion of Ukraine, for example, received very strong support from the patriarch. And it shows how anti-Westernism, nationalism are now a part of this clergy-state alliance in Russia. And in India, Modi is establishing the Hindu version of clergy-state alliance. Hindutva is a nationalist, religious nationalist ideology asking to make India a Hindu state. And against Gandhi dynasty, because as you know, Indira Gandhi was not the daughter of Mahatma Gandhi. Indira Gandhi was the daughter of Nehru, but she got the name by marriage. Then Nehru, daughter, then the grandson, then grandson's son, then his wife, they all became the leader of the country as a de facto dynasty. And Modi came and said, I am the man of the people, a humble origin against the dynasty. And another important dimension of his policies is to make Muslims more marginal in political life. And anti-Muslim citizenship law was part of this policy. So to make the long story short, I want to emphasize that in my new project, tentatively titled God and the People as a new book coming next year, I look at these cases, present right-wing populism as a problem for democracy worldwide and try to understand how right-wing populism received power by establishing a new alliance with religion and nationalism, and how these populist leaders play a similar playbook, how the social media, which has very good aspects. I'm very active in social media. I find it liberating, help people for social mobility connection. But at the same time, social media contribute anti-intellectualism. Professors like us, journalists, intellectuals, now undermined by a capitalist techno-billionaire class like Jeff Bezos buying Washington Post and firing a third of the journalists there. And social media and intellectualism have been used very effectively by populists. And neoliberalism also brings us to a point where liberal democracy is in crisis, and populists are both cause and effect of this crisis. And this project is linked to my previous ones. My first book was on secularism and state policies toward religion, the United States, France, and Turkey. 2009 Cambridge University Press book, where I defined two types of secularism. One was passive secularism in the United States, where the state is supposed to be passive when it comes to religious or secular way of life, symbols, and public expressions. Whereas in France and Turkey, an assertive secular states try to dominate public life with a secularist ideology. John Rawls, the political theorists, use the term comprehensive doctrine. So this secularism, assertive form, claim itself as a comprehensive doctrine competing religions, whereas passive secularism is a free arena, not competing with religions or other comprehensive doctrines. And then I asked the question, why did United States have passive secularism, whereas France and Turkey assertive? And of course, in each of the three cases, there are historical peculiarities. In Turkey, for example, late Ottoman era, there was very strong secular elite. Many were influenced by Auguste Comte, and the Brazilian flag also have order and progress, right? The Auguste Comte's motto. And the secular tendencies, nationalist political party in the Ottoman Empire was called Order and Progress, İttihat and Terakki, unification and progress. So Auguste Comte, as you see, influenced many countries, including late Ottoman era. But the main reason why Turkey and Turkey and France produced assertive secularism, but not US, was that during the monarchy, there was very strong clergy-state alliance. Whereas in America, there was never a hegemonic religion in alliance with an established monarchy. Americans had the revolution against the British colonization. France and Turkey, ancien regime in France and Ottoman regime in Turkey had a clergy-state alliance. That's why Republicans attacked both clergy and the monarchy, and assertive secularism was the end result. So that's why in the Islam book, I look at the role of clergy-state alliance. And last but not least, I want to emphasize how this book, just published in Portuguese, and I'm going to launch it in João Pessoa, take this issue of clergy-state alliance as an important explanatory factor. Let me briefly say the following. There is a very strong cliche people keep repeating, that there is no separation between religion and state in Islam, whereas in Christianity there is always separation, because Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And then in the book, I am saying, first of all, you don't know either Islam or Christianity, because in Orthodox Christianity, there never was separation. Byzantine Empire, Greek Orthodox Church, today's Russia, they don't say it. Separation only happened in the Christian history as a result of certain wars in the 11th century, movements, etc. It's not simply referring to some phrase in the Bible. In Islam, the book shows, interestingly, that when Muslims had a golden age of science and economy from 8th to 12th centuries, there was a separation between religion and state. And I refer to religious authorities, clergy, in Arabic ulama, in Turkish too, ulama means Islamic scholars, you can call them clergy, and the state. So in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries, Europe was marginal. You call the term Dark Ages or you don't. It doesn't change the fact that between Augustine and Seneca, Europe didn't produce a single important philosopher. Europe didn't have a city like Baghdad. Europe didn't have a single paper factory. Their cities were small, their commerce was marginal. But Muslims had libraries with millions of books. They were at least hundreds of thousands. They were paper factories all around multiple cities. They had cosmopolitan cities. They produced modern camera, prototype of camera, obscura. They gave us the Hindu Arabic numbers from 0 to 9. Many terms we use today, from algebra to algorithm, even alcohol, sugar, rice, coming from Arabic, because the Arab Muslim civilization were teaching from Aristotelian philosophy to mathematics to Europeans. So the book asks, how come this brilliant civilization end up today very little scientific development, very little democracy, very little even socioeconomic development if you put oil money aside? Most things coming from oil. If there's no oil, socioeconomic development would be even worse in the Muslim world. And the answer I'm producing in the book is that when Muslims had a separation between religion and state, two other classes were very strong. Intellectual class, Islamic scholars, philosophers, mathematicians, and others, and merchant class. And the merchants and intellectuals had a connection. But after the 11th and 12th centuries, things changed because of economic crisis, militarization, climate change, Crusaders and Mongols. The ulama and they started to establish a new alliance, and they marginalized merchant class and intellectuals. And then Ottoman Empire established the Sunni version of ulama-state alliance, and Iran under the Safavids established Shia version of ulama-state alliance. And this became a part of Islamic teaching. That's why it's so persistent. That's why both Islamists and Islamophobes keep repeating that there is no separation in Islam, because the early Islamic separation between religion and state is forgotten. So with the book, I try to remind that the ulama-state alliance today is a problem, but it's not part of Islam. Muslims had a history of separation. Therefore, essentializing Islam as Samuel Huntington and Bernard Lewis did was wrong. Just blaming colonization, wrong too. We need to look at the internal problems in the Muslim world, and the solution is to dismantle ulama-state alliance and empower intellectuals and the bourgeoisie or economic class. So as you see at the end, religion is important, but it's not everything. And we have to analyze the role of religion from history to present. And instead of discussing big cliche about the Quran, about the Bible, about the prophets, we have to look at the agency. And the agency is the social classes, the ulama in the Muslim world, and how these ulama make alliance with political class is an important question I ask in the Islam book. And in the populism book now, I am trying to expand the argument to other cases in non-Muslim countries. So thanks for listening, and if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Now the question.
Primeiro, só avisando que o pessoal do YouTube que quiser fazer algum comentário, pode deixar no chat, pode deixar em português, que a gente traduz aqui.
So you said that neoliberalism accelerated this rise in populism. I just wanted to understand how exactly. So people got frustrated about the economy, so they started accepting more this nationalist and far-right agenda.
Thank you. This is an excellent question. What's your name?
I'm Lucas.
Lucas, very good question. I'm trying to keep it to the book so that it will be interesting. People read explaining things now and here, but briefly I can say is that many aspects of this complex relation is unintended. So the neoliberals, who are the neoliberals? Of course, there are some intellectual architects like Hayek and Friedman. They didn't want to desecularize the world and increase the level of religiosity. There is no such scheme. But it happened unintentionally. There are, I think, two ways, multiple ways, but I will touch upon two. One is that for various reasons, left-wing parties and movements tend to be more secular. Marxists, Leninists, they are more secular. They think religion is something to be whittled away. If you read Marx, The Jewish Question, or other writings, he doesn't have a positive notion of religion. And then the right-wing parties, especially the Republican Party in America, has been very successful to bring together capitalism and religion. Because for the rich, they say we will reduce the taxes, and by minimizing the state. And for the Christian right, they say the state is taking your hospitals, the state is taking your schools, the state is taking your public role. When we minimize the state, your religious forces flourish in education, in health, etc. So that's why there is very much overlapping between the libertarian capitalist economic agenda and the religious agenda against welfare state. Many believe that the reason why religious is so low in Europe is welfare policies, because they say if people have no concern about education, health, etc., they don't go to religious institutions. So that's how a neoliberal agenda of privatization overlap with religious agenda of expanding religious institutions. The more recent way is that there is now a frustration. People are outraged. Why? Because the income inequality is deepening in America. So we now have not only billionaires, but trillionaires, right? $1 trillion value companies. Elon Musk may become a trillionaire as an individual. And if someone has $1 trillion, it means many people have not enough money, right? Because life is full of trade-off. And this income inequality, added by economic problems and worry about AI, the worry about the unseen future, make people hate the established system. And populists came and say, we are against the establishment. And this frustration somehow channeled. And for example, if you are an American, feel yourself poor, normally you are supposed to go after neoliberal policies, making you poor and some people richer. But instead, populists channel this anger to the immigrants, to globalization, and say 50 years ago America was great because we don't have globalization or these many immigrants. That's the genius of populist rhetoric and discourse. Rather than seeing that poverty lead anger against capitalism, they channel the anger to the elite, to the minorities, and to globalization.
I will take one. It's hard for us that we study Islam and all the time it said that the caliphate, it's the state or the Islam grew with this attachment between the political leader and the religious leader. So when you tell me that before the Ottoman Empire it didn't exist, it makes my mind a little bit confused. So I would like you to explain better, because the caliphate was a very powerful tool, and to enhance the arts and science, so on. So as I said, it's difficult. As I said before, it's difficult for me to understand this. And the other question is about, you said that Sanders and Mamdani are populists.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to understand why their characteristics that make them populists.
Thank you. Let's start with, thank you for the question. Let me start with the quicker one. Sanders and Mamdani directly attack the billionaires, establish media's defense of capitalist inequality, and they appeal people in a way that the marginalized people will be represented by their political leadership. And Mamdani in the campaign say, I don't think there should be billionaires. So as a category, he rejects them. Of course, we can debate how to categorize them, but some people see that when Mamdani and Trump met, and Trump showed certain romantic feelings against him, very surprisingly positive. And then Trump also referred to Bernie Sanders, saying that when he couldn't be nominated, many people supported him, voted me. So even he sees a connection between populists, although he's very different from them, but there is an overlapping constituency they're addressing, appealing the anti-elite discourse. So, but the big question about Islam, you are very much right to say that this is counterintuitive, because many Muslims, when they hear it, they bluntly reject the idea, because the religion, politics, unification in Islam has been taught so successfully and systematically in the last centuries, as if it is part of Islam. And let me briefly emphasize three things. First, I look at the discourse of the preachers of this caliphate or unification. They refer to a hadith of the Prophet. Hadith means the saying of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, which is a sacred thing for Muslims, which says religion and state are twins. Religion is the foundation, state is the guardian. That without foundation collapses, that without guardian perishes. When we look at the discourse analysis, it is a fabrication, not an authentic saying of the Prophet. It is an Iranian maxim said 300 years before Muhammad. But after the 11th century, when the ulama state alliance architects want a justification, they fabricate this statement as if the Prophet said it, although it's an Iranian dogma or maxim. And then there is nothing about state or the ulama authority in the Quran, but the Quran says a phrase, ulul amri minkum, which means ulul amr, those who have authority, minkum, among you. Follow those who have authority among you. For centuries, this phrase interpreted in different ways to follow those who have wisdom, knowledge, expertise. But after the 11th century, especially 12th century, Ibn Taymiyyah, a major source of inspiration for Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia or Salafis elsewhere, said that this verse asked Muslims to obey ulama and the state. So once they successfully established this notion of ulama state as an Islamic teaching, it became more difficult to challenge. So the other two things very briefly. How am I going to document? First of all, we have numerical data. Several analyses show, and a very important one especially, say from 8th to mid-11th century, out of 3,900 ulama Islamic scholars, 91% had private jobs like barber shop owner. Most of them work in commerce, some in the textile sector. Only 9% accept to be paid by the state. So nobody says that there is absolute separation. There is never an absolute separation. Even in America, the separation is always a contested relative issue. Even in France, it is. But majority reject to be paid by the state from 8th to mid-11th century. Today, overwhelming majority of Islamic scholars are paid by states. In Turkey, 80,000 imam paid by government, in Diyanet, the state agency. In Egypt, majority of state mosques are under state control, so on and so forth. So then there are many anecdotes showing leading Islamic scholars refuse to be paid by the state. So today, 85% of Muslims are Sunni. They represent by 4 schools. And each member of the founder of the 4 schools, so each founder of the 4 schools, refused to be paid by the state. They were persecuted, some of them tortured and killed. A famous scholar, Abu Hanifa, the founder of the biggest Islamic school today Muslims follow, he was proposed to be judge by the Caliph, Abbasi Caliph. And he said no, because he doesn't want to be part of his corrupt regime. Then the Caliph pushed him, give me a reason. Why saying no? Give me a reason. And then Abu Hanifa, this 8th century great scholar, say, I am not qualified. That makes the Abbasi Caliph, the king, present himself also religious authority, very angry. He said, you are a liar. You are the most qualified. How dare you say I am not qualified? Then Abu Hanifa said, a liar can never be a judge. Then the leader put him in jail. He was poisoned to death. So, Voltaire says for Holy Roman Empire, it was neither holy nor Roman nor empire, right? The caliphate was never really a religious authority after the 4. The Prophet, then the Abu Bakr, Umar, Osman, Ali, the 4, then the rest, they are the kings. They never had a religious authority. Nobody remembered their names except one who lived only 1 year.
I have a question.
Yes.
We have a lot of papers, articles being published recently in Brazil saying that we need to analyze this new right-wing movement as a new version of fascism. And we have some scholars saying that we cannot say such a thing. So I'd like to hear from you if you can do a historical comparison between this relationship between religion, populism, and politics in right wing nowadays and in post-First War and right movements.
Thank you so much. So there are clearly similarities. One is that fascism between the 2 world wars emerging as a result of certain economic disruptions and crises. Today, we don't have such deep crisis, but as I briefly mentioned, there are many grievances on economic ground that capitalism produce inequality and people in America, for example, having hard time to pay their health bills, medical bills, where country has billions of dollars to spend for other issues. That's the similarity. But the difference is also clearly that fascists, first of all, they were clearly nationalists, but this level of religiosity, making religion part of their government and discourses, maybe only strategically sometimes, but generally they were more secular, in relative terms, of course. Maybe in Spain, Franco had a strong alliance with Catholic Church, etc. But when we talk of Mussolini and Hitler, we may see a less direct connection with a partnership with religious authorities. And another thing is that in many cases, populists rule on behalf of democracy. Trump ruling in democracy, Le Pen influenced democracy. Netanyahu, he never say, I am canceling elections, right? So therefore, Hitler, Mussolini level dictatorship rarely seen because of the different conditions. Even Putin, I cannot imagine Putin saying that I'm completely canceling elections in the country. That's what I can briefly say.
No? Any question?
Thank you then. Yes.
Thank you very much for your great lecture and your great response.
Thank you. It's great to be hosted at the University of Sao Paulo on my first day of visiting Brazil. Thank you.
Great.